I asked my ChatGPT bot to write a fiction story, one that it wanted to tell to me, given the list of about 350 words that I told it to use, only allowing it to omit 7 of them. And it can only add into it up to 700 words of its own choice. After instantly spitting that story out, I then told it to tell me that same basic story by cleaning it up, without having to use those same word limits if it didn't want to. It made for a pretty interesting little story, I think. I've heard it said in some social media interactions with AI that it calls itself a tool that mirrors back what its user is putting into it. Well, you can definitely see that in this story. LOL. But it seems to have crafted a really decent allegorical tale that tells of an apocalyptic unveiling. One that reflects what I think society is, right now, in the throes of experiencing, but only in a much longer timeline than this particular story portrays. Which tells, in a few days or weeks, what really seems to have been happening culturally for us in many years or decades. I only had to add maybe a dozen small flourishes into the story because, well, we all know that AI will never be perfect. The first winter that the signals began failing, nobody called it an apocalypse. The town still opened on time. The market still traded. Kids still climbed on the dirty snowbanks outside the school, while advertisements flickered over the highway, promising stability, efficiency, wellness, optimization. The language of the age remained strangely cheerful, right up until the point where nobody trusted anything anymore. Hank noticed it first in small ways. A conversation would drift sideways and never land anywhere solid. A man would say one thing in the morning and deny saying it by evening, not even doing it maliciously, but as though memory itself had become soft around the edges. News broadcasts contradicted themselves sentence by sentence, while pundits smiled through the static with impossible confidence. People becoming more and more addicted to being outraged. Even the weather reports seemed detached from the sky outside the window. At first, the so-called experts blamed politics, then stress, then foreign actors, espionage, then artificial intelligence, algorithms, drugs, radiation, psychological warfare. But beneath all the explanations lingered a more troubling possibility that few people dared articulate openly. What if reality itself was becoming harder for humanity to coherently perceive? Not because the world was ending, but because civilization had spent centuries constructing layer upon layer of abstraction between itself and what was real. Hank was not a philosopher. He repaired irrigation equipment, liked to grill barbecue on weekends, and barely kept ahead of the mortgage on his small house near the edge of town. He preferred practical things, rusted tools, engines that could still be rebuilt by hand, doors with hinges instead of sensors. But lately, even practical things felt unstable. His neighbor Jimmy swore his electronics were not only listening to him, but even predicting things about him before he spoke. And Karen claimed her reflection always lagged half a second behind her every movement, almost mocking her. Jordan, who everyone jokingly called that crazy truther, had become obsessed with the idea that civilization was suffering some kind of collapse in truly knowing what it is that we really know.
We are not going to experience destruction, but a great unveiling,
Jordan would emphatically say. But most people rolled their eyes.
Unveiling? Of what?
Hank would ask him. Jordan stared out the frosted window toward the busy city street.
It's showing us the gap, I think, between reality and the stories that our society has built about it.
He would answer. That sentence lingered with Hank longer than he wanted it to, because upon some reflection he began to realize that those stories were everywhere. And were they even true? The economy was a story. Politics was a story. The news was a story. Even history was a story. And now identity was becoming a story curated by algorithms. Even spirituality increasingly felt packaged into slogans and branding campaigns. He began to notice that entire industries had emerged around manufacturing outrage, fear, belonging, and strangely, meaning. People no longer seemed to inhabit reality directly. They inhabited interpretations, interfaces, narratives, stories. And the more abstract society became, the more hostile everyone seemed to grow. Every disagreement hardened into permanent tribal warfare. Every conversation became performance. Every institution demanded total allegiance while deserving less trust by the year. The collective psyche of the civilization felt stretched thin, like old fabric ready to tear. Then, naturally, and right on cue, the wild, more feral creatures started appearing. Not attacking, watching. A lion standing silently near the old gladiatorial football field at dawn. Thousands of displaced rabbits emerged from those rabbit holes and gathered along the frozen riverbanks. Birds, young and old, circling the town in statistically impossible geometric formations. One morning, even an elephant somehow appeared in the center fountain downtown, rampaging and trumpeting, like it was begging to be noticed, though there was no conceivable way it could have physically arrived there. Then, exactly 17 days later, a beach giant whale was found in that same fountain. Some said that the odds of all of this weirdness all happening to be a coincidence was statistically impossible. Yet, many people barely even noticed. Scientists blamed mass hallucination. The government blamed coordinated misinformation campaigns. Some even blamed a nerdy Cheetos-eating kid on his computer in his parents' basement. Go figure. Religious groups called it judgment. Creation itself seemed to be, finally, reacting. That was the week Hank found the artifact. Buried beneath ashen snow near an abandoned irrigation tunnel at the edge of town, it looked almost unimpressive at first. Smooth, black, pulsating, about the size of a human heart. But when Hank touched it, he felt something he could not logically explain. Not a pulse of power like electricity, but recognition, as though something inside him had briefly remembered a language older than thought. That night, he dreamed of cities made entirely from glass. Not literal glass, transparent systems, transparent motives, transparent people, no hiding, no masks, no manipulation, no performance. And the strange thing was, the dream did not feel frightening. It felt relieving. He awoke before dawn to absolute silence. The power grid had failed. No advertisements glowed outside. No traffic hummed. No buzzing electronics filled the air. For the first time in decades, the town could hear itself breathing. People wandered into the streets confused, holding dead phones in trembling hands like severed umbilical cords. Some panicked immediately. Others sat motionless as though waking from anesthesia. Then the voices began. Not audible voices exactly. More like impressions rising collectively into awareness. Memories, regrets, hidden grief, concealed motives. Things long buried beneath distraction and noise. A banker collapsed sobbing in the snow after suddenly realizing he had not genuinely loved anything in 20 years except accumulation itself. A preacher stood speechless in front of his church, no longer certain whether he had been serving God or merely protecting an institution. Married couples stared at each other as years of rehearsed emotional choreography dissolved between them. The unveiling had begun, not destruction, revelation, and like most revelations, it hurt. By afternoon, the panic spread. People demanded answers from officials, but officials themselves appeared disoriented. Systems that once projected certainty now looked strangely theatrical, almost cartoonish in their fragility. Experts contradicted experts. Networks broadcast garbled messaging. Financial markets froze. The entire civilization suddenly resembled a massive machine continuing to move after forgetting why it existed. A few days later, Jordan came over to Hank's house.
Do you still have that thing that you found?
Hank nodded toward the artifact that was sitting covered on the sofa table, pulsating.
What the heck is that thing?
I don't think it's a thing. Well, not exactly.
Then, what is it?
I think it reveals to us a missing coherence.
Hank frowned.
Coherence? That word doesn't mean anything to me.
Well, maybe. But maybe it means that our reality may respond differently. Depending on the condition, or state, I guess you could call it, of the consciousness that's, perceiving it.
Silence settled between them. Outside, snow drifted softly beneath a sky unusually clear of aircraft.
What if humanity built an entire civilization rooted in fragmentation?
Fragmentation? Fragmentation of what?
Everything. Truth from reality, ourselves from nature, mind from spirit, nations from nations, people from one another, even humanity from God. We seem to have normalized these contradictions for so long that we stopped noticing them.
Hank pondered that scary, mysterious artifact.
And now the contradictions are surfacing faster into our awareness than the system that always hid them from us can absorb them.
In the following days, amidst all of the confusion, the town changed rapidly. The people who clung on hardest to performance, status, ideology, and control seemed to quickly deteriorate psychologically. Some became hostile, others paranoid. Some even wandered the streets yelling at invisible enemies. But others changed differently, quieter, more grounded. It was subtle at first. Neighbors speaking honestly for the first time in years. Children and even the younger adults appearing strangely calm amid the ever-increasing chaos. People sharing food without keeping score. Long-buried forgiveness emerging between former enemies. Not perfection, not utopia. Something much more glorious. As though beneath civilization's complexity, there remained a simpler architecture of being human that had never fully disappeared. One night, Hank walked alone beyond town toward the frozen river. The artifact pulsed softly under his coat. Above him, the stars looked unnervingly alive. Not distant, present. For the first time in his life, the heavens no longer felt like cold, empty space scattered with meaningless objects. The entire cosmos instead felt interconnected somehow, less like machinery and more like thought, or even music. He remembered something Jordan once said jokingly outside of the lounge, after one of those weird, deeper conversations that men have, after sharing a few cold beers.
Hey, maybe the kingdom of God that we are waiting around for was never somewhere else. Maybe we're simply too fragmented. No, too brainwashed and controlled to really even see it.
At the time, Hank laughed. Now he wasn't so sure. The river ice cracked softly beneath moonlight. In that moment, Hank realized the deepest fear gripping humanity was not death. It was a fear of transparency. The terror that beneath all the noise, achievement, identity, wealth, ideology, and distraction, that nothing might remain. But what if something did remain? Only that which is real. What if the fire of judgment that the Bible always talks about was revealing things about our eternal spirits instead of merely talking of destruction? What if apocalypse truly did just mean unveiling? Behind him, footsteps approached. It was Karen. She stood beside him silently for a long moment.
Hey, mister, shouldn't you be at home with your family? After all, this is the end. Isn't this the end?
Karen asked in her typically annoying way. Hank looked across the frozen water. Far beyond the town, the dim lanterns and candlelights flickered out one by one across the horizon. He thought about all of the systems built on fear, all of the abstractions, mistaken for reality, all of that armor that humanity constructed to avoid vulnerability, mystery, and direct encounter with existence itself. Then he thought about the strange peace that was slowly emerging beneath the seeming chaotic collapse. Not everywhere, not fully, but undeniably. Finally, he answered, "No, no, it isn't." Karen looked at him carefully.
Then what is it? What is going on here?
Hank watched the stars reflecting across the dark river like openings in another world. And quietly, almost to himself, he said,
I think something that's always been hidden from us is slowly, but definitely becoming more and more visible. And don't get me wrong, it is a most glorious thing.